Welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank Podcast. I'm here with Miranda.
Hello.
Miranda, if I was going to ask you what drives you, or what would you say you are particularly interested in, which one do you want to answer?
What drives me? I have a 5-year-old, so she drives the house, right? So at this point, it's, I know that when you're 20 years old, you talk about what passions you have, and then you have a child, and you're like, it's just, one day at a time, especially during the pandemic. So that, I would take that off the table.
Yeah.
Like keeping the house from breaking, in any given day, right?
Yeah. I think definitely when I was probably, I don't know, when I was a little kid, I was always thinking I was going to be something. And then now that I'm 23. So like when I look through life now, I'm like, what do I want to do? Everything's completely changed. I'm so interested in so many different subjects now.
Yeah. I mean, but that doesn't change, I hope, right? I mean,
I definitely don't want to be an astronaut anymore. I think now I want to be, or a Power Ranger. I wanted to be a Power Ranger for the longest time. Now I'm just like, I want to do something where I don't feel like I'm suffering at my day job every day.
well, I mean, a certain amount of suffering,
For better things, I hope.
it's just some of it's like, I suffer when I have to do my tax returns every year, but they still have to do, or I have to do my laundry, or
you got to outsource for that.
So, I mean, there's that, right? I mean, it's a certain amount of suffering in life. Like I suffer every time I go to the dentist.
I mostly think about I don't think, especially being at a job, like I've had jobs where I've sat in my car, like the extra couple minutes, like I don't want to go in here. Like you want to do something that makes you happy. You want to do something, as long as you feel like you're not doing anything necessarily bad and you actually don't mind waking up in the morning, I consider it being on the right track.
Yes. I mean, I've worked at the University of Michigan for almost 20 years. So at this point.
What exactly do you do at the university?
I'm a professor.
Professor of what?
Of Chinese studies.
What exactly about Chinese studies?
Well, I mean, I was hired as a classicist, so I did ancient history back in the day, when I was, in my 20s. And
About a couple of years ago,
then
right? A couple of years ago.
no, no, I'm 46.
Wow,
It's
you
on
look
my
great.
Twitter bio. So this is like not a secret. I don't hide my age. If I were a movie star, that might be more real, there'd be more, but even then now people don't do it, right? So I was a classicist. I worked in I did a dissertation on mortuary history and in the Han Dynasty, and then I wrote a book about the politics of mourning, and it was published, I think, in 2007. At this point, I don't remember. It's what we call a tenure book. So I'm an academic, and then I got interested in the history of medicine, in Chinese medicine. So I started working on that for 10 years, and got interested in sort of doing more experimental history. And then this will be a question for you. Then I decided to teach a class on Asian food history, because we were trying to come up with classes that would draw majors or students into this sort of study of Asia, at a Midwestern school. And I really, didn't know what I was getting into. I started learning food history on the fly, and I got really into it. And then I had a child. And I was supposed to be working on a project on the history of time, or concepts of time in classical Chinese, but I found myself wandering off into the world of like recipes and, food videos and, the history of dishes. And I clearly at one point realized that, this sort of legitimate academic topic that I thought I needed to do was not what I really felt like doing. So, as a person who is fully promoted and tenured for, X number of years, I thought that, it'd be really fun to just focus on the history of food, since that's what I was interested in. And I've always been sort of interested in cooking. So
I've only dabbled in probably the most insane stuff about food history, like cornflakes, the original invention of that. It throws everybody off, which I'm like, I know it's fascinating. I don't know if you know the history of cornflakes.
No, tell me about the history of cornflakes. I might borrow that for class one day.
It was invented to prevent masturbation because in 1974, Sir Harvey Kellogg believed that spicy foods and sugar foods led to your passions increasing. And he thought if you gave people boring, bland cereal, that it would cause them to be kind of low leveled, not high energy, and not want to masturbate all the time. That's the quick, brief rundown.
There's sugar, right? I mean,
That's the thinking of 1974 is like, well, this is this. And then there was a, and then
Well, but
is
the 70s were wild. I
that's
mean,
what I'm
so I,
saying.
I so I read,
That's
I
why
mean, I was a baby.
that's why I say it's interesting to like learn
Yeah.
about like what we thought back then compared to what we know now. I mean, I think a lot of people now, especially with the rise of gastrointestinal issues, like I have one experiencing myself too. And I started talking to so many people like, oh, I
Hmm.
have a piece of my intestine removed. I'm like, that's gotta be from your food. Like if there's a link to fertility count in people today based on plastic consumption, then something with artificial preservatives has to have a long lasting effect on generations when it comes to your food.
Well, I mean, I'm not a nutritional expert. I don't do bio, so I will reserve judgment. But I do remember reading a study once of like somebody had done like looking at the sort of twin rates of vegans versus non-vegan women, and that was, I think, what convinced me to buy organic milk. And I'm just like,
I,
and it's just one of those, and I've never, I'm, I'm from a generation where we didn't grow up on organic milk, right? I mean, I was born in the mid 70s, so we just, and so I had always wondered about all of that. Like I saw it as an invitation to pay more. But that study, reading about that study was enough. I was like, okay,
I'm
just in case.
I'm a big fitness guy. So like I mean I work at a gym. So like I've studied nutrition. I mean I've worked out and that's kind of like goes hand in hand. You got to learn how to eat right if you want to keep what you're kind of making in the gym a little bit too. Definitely like I haven't eaten red meat in a long time. It actually makes my stomach upset. I'm not vegan. I just eat fish because I'm from a beach town. So everything we consume here is fish. My only thing is like whenever like vegan people get mad or whenever meat eaters get mad, it all is on the basic of like, don't eat this or don't eat that. I'm like, we got to slowly find a way to, especially in America, to work off the process of how we've just based everything on industrial farming. Everything comes from meat. Our main produce is kind of meat.
Hmm.
It's not really rice and grains. I actually had a rice scientist on here, Whitney Brim DeForest.
Hmm.
Amazing, like rice research she talks about and stuff I kind of goes beyond my grasp. But it's this concept of like, there's so much beneficial stuff when it comes to agriculture, when it comes to plants for sure. But our system just runs off of the meat thing where I'm like, it's not about cutting it out 100% right now. It's about the
Hmm.
long process of trying to find a way not to wean off this thing. Because if you really look at, like I tell people, if you're going to consume chicken, if you're going to consume beef, go to one of those factories and see how it gets done because you're going to use a lot less because you actually need a lot less than you think you do. My issue is that there's so much food that goes to waste. And it's not like rice or something like that where you can put it in the refrigerator, maybe use it for later. It's stuff that ends up going bad and you have to throw it out. Then you're
Hmm.
having what? A plate of 10 chicken breasts, that's 10 chickens dead. And then you're just like, I'm only going to eat 4. It's like, okay, well, what about the others? Well, I'm going to put them in the fridge and a week later, I'm going to find them and I'm
Hmm.
going to throw them out. I don't like that because I think when you understand where your food comes from, the process of what happens to these things when you use it, there's something deeper there, which causes you to use less. And then you actually start to see the consumption and the use of food instead of being thrown out. There's so much food that goes to waste. I'm like, I get it. Like other cultures use rice, other cultures live off vegetables and also incorporate a little bit of fish or some meats. It's way more beneficial than, going to the store during the pandemic, for instance, red meat. There was a fear of red meat that was going to go out and you're never going to buy red meat again. Everyone flocked to the stores and then none of them, they put it in deep freezers. And I'm like, someone could actually use and eat that. You're not going to get, when are you going to use that? In case it runs out. In case what? What are you saying? Like, I think the fear of like stores closing down, I've known so many people now that have started their own gardens in their backyard. I mean, I've had plenty of people that produce their own hot sauces that grow peppers in their backyard. They've been doing it long before other people started hopping on the trend. It's like baking sourdough bread in your house. You want to start being able to produce for yourself and fear that in one day you might not be able to do so. So I want to find more beneficial ways in this crucial time to study a little bit more, learn a little bit more, and find alternative ways that we could be eating to make a healthier person. Because when you feel healthy, you're not going to treat someone bad because usually most of the time you're mad at the world or you get angry is because you feel bad about yourself, whether it's spiritually, emotionally, or just the food you're putting in your body.
Well, I mean, yeah, food is a, so I don't have a big fridge. I mean, because I think a lot of these, I think a huge portion of our food waste and our emissions are connected to the size of fridges. There's a project right now that's run out of the University of Michigan about places like for example, China is actually late to hopping into the sort of refrigeration bandwagon. And so there's, a lot of food delivery, and they're thinking about ways of like avoiding the large American fridges, which, sort of contribute to food waste and also emissions. And I think that's a very positive and also kind of, practical approach, right? I mean, there are people who think that we should get everyone on the vegan bandwagon. Good luck getting Americans to do that.
It's gonna be hard.
Right? I mean, we have to be kind of realistic about what we can ask of people. I mean, it's not also fair to ask the developing world to just stick with vegetables when we consume far more of meat and, dairy than anybody else. But there's got to be ways of producing it smarter and thinking about food waste and other sort of sources of global emissions, pollution, whatnot, right? I mean, so I'm a realist. I think, yeah, asking Americans to cut out meat would be impossible, but maybe thinking about food waste and then also how much red meat, right?
Yeah.
And that's it's probably in those details. And I live in the Midwest. I have grown to understand how Americans eat meat. I cook for my in-laws and their extended family, and I can see how their expectations around protein consumption at a meal may be different from mine.
I mean, if there's some aspects in some parts of the society, at least in this country, in the US of A, is that East Coast, for instance, if you're right on the water like I am, you don't
Mhm.
meat's a rarity. I mean, it costs a lot for a steak down here, only because the easy option for us is fish. Now, if you go to Tennessee, it's going to be a different answer because over there, meat's so easily there, and fish is so hard for them to get that to them as a delicacy. Where I'm like, there's got to be a healthy medium where we can find our basis of consumption should be based on what we actually need, not how much we can see with our eyes. The issue is that the world kind of runs off of if there's last two things there, I want both of those rather than just taking the one that I need, and leaving the extra in case someone else wants that. So that's their one.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, but also just expectations, like, how big a steak do you want in a single serving, right?
When you're
Yeah,
hungry, you want everything.
I don't eat steak, so there's. I made my first steak over Christmas. I had never made one before, but
Is that a
there's
tradition you
also.
have? Like I have a Christmas tradition where I'll have shrimp and steak, mostly just the shrimp. I'm a big seafood guy.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but I do think it's like, I was making a recipe yesterday for Father's Day, and I made a Sichuan dish, which is the eggplant that's usually done with ground pork, and I substitute turkey just because there's enough oil in the dish. But what's interesting is that it's you've got 500 grams of eggplant and then a quarter cup of like ground meat, and it's like the amount of meat is very modest, right,
Yeah.
in the original recipe, and I had to like do a pound of meat and then maybe like 130% of the same amount of like of eggplant, and then then I make the meal and everybody's still hungry, because they're American guys. And so I was like, but I'm thinking that, if we could get more sort of, if the meat was like served with more vegetables and hot sauce, and there could be ways of like going after the amount of meat people consume at the margins, right? And also making them healthier. I mean, there's nothing wrong with eating eggplant or beans or.
I did a little personal experiment on myself. So I've only eaten one can of tuna a day. I take a quarter scoop of that can of tuna and I put it on top of something, whether it's a little small bowl of rice or whether it's some beans or something like that. And you start to realize, as much as I was like, because I'm a lifter guy, I work around bodybuilder people, where one dude, he was doing 10 pull-ups. He sat down and pulled out a 10-ounce steak and started eating it after his 10 pull-ups. I'm like, how are you so ripped? And he's like, steroids. I'm like, oh, okay, that makes more sense. So I'm involved in this whole industry where everybody's eating every 2 hours or has these meal times
Right.
and these sort of things to it. I think the thing is, you need less than you think you do. When I
Hmm.
eat a can of tuna throughout the whole entire day, I'm doing one quarter scoop of tuna and putting it on some rice and stuff. And I realize, like, you adjust to that. You don't just start there. You don't just go, I'm going to stop eating 12 donuts or do whatever. I'm going to just eat half a can of tuna. No, you got to slowly wean yourself down to that. And you realize you need less than you think you do. And that's where the
Yeah.
basic consumption factor comes in.
Yeah, people think they need more protein than they do. It's a fact. I mean, there's been studies of this that were around 25 years ago when I was in college taking nutrition. So you definitely need less. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I mean, for models, you'd look to Asia where, there is meat, but it's mixed in with vegetables, and you get all your food groups in one fell swoop. And I guess that's a way to go. I mean, I'm not a huge meat person. If I could kill myself with my diet, it'd probably be on croissant and pastry. So
It's because it's
it's
good.
just a different thing, right? It's a different sin.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think where I like for food for me, what I found interesting was if you really come across like if you want to look at the addiction to food, like the amount of body dysmorphia and stuff that goes on, check a fitness facility. There are people in there that like people go like, how could you eat that? It's just bland and tasteless, and you have to put sauce on it to make it taste a certain thing. But they like eating that. It's used to what they like, is because that's what they're kind of been like. For me, a can of tuna, people think that's horrible. I think it's a delicacy. I think it's delicious because I've used to eating it every single day for 9 years, where
Hmm.
it's like I've been programmed and I've just lost the craving for bread. I found other ways around not eating bread and eating these types of things that make you feel like crap. I mean, my buddy is a giant like gluten fiend. He loves everything that's gluten. Then he found out he has
Yeah.
a disease that he can't eat it. And that's what's making him been feel bad for so long, where he has to go to the non-gluten stuff. And he's like, my whole life is wrong. He's been doing it for a year and he loves it. He enjoys everything that he makes now. I'm like, you find ways to adapt to the things that you like once you get used to it, but it takes a while. It might take a little bit to be able to find that. But the addiction between what you actually need and what tastes good and makes the pain go away is the problem. A lot of people choose to eat all these really crappy, unhealthy foods, sometimes because their eyes are bigger than their stomachs are, but at the
Hmm.
same time, it makes them feel good. A lot of it is dealing with pain in a certain way, which leads down to some other issues.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's true. I mean, but it's hard for Americans, right? Because there's a struggle with food, whereas in other places, getting enough is a completely different game, right? And so,
Well, look at
I
like
mean,
what was it, Japan or whoever that has everything over there is like when they got fried foods and everything, it was like a big giant trend.
yeah. I mean, a lot of it's just portion size, right? I mean, when I lived in Japan many, many years ago, it was, you
Yeah,
know,
it's not like well,
no.
it's because the cost here is like over there, like if you import a meal over there, it's harder to get sometimes. So it might be this expensive thing. And over here, it's like they have deep fried Oreos for $1.50. I'm like, what are we living in right now?
Well, so yeah, so portion size, the consumer expectations, portion size, people's sense of value. I mean, you go to a French fancy restaurant tasting menu place, and you'll get the small, you know, portions, right? And it's just it's some of it's cultural, some of it's expectations. And also I assume some of it's class based, right? I mean, the United States, there are many Americas, and there are different cuisines for those different Americas.
It's definitely on the basis of like what you really can afford. I mean, can of tuna is cheap for me because it's $1. So I'm like that. If nobody wants it, I'll take it. It's pretty good in my opinion. I don't know if I just
Mhm.
brainwashed myself, but there's seasonings too to be able to do that. I look at it like if I offered you 12 plates of donuts right now and we're like, calories aside, 12 plates of donuts, you're going to be like, oh my God, this is amazing. I would love 12 plates of nice
No, I
glazed or
wouldn't. Actually, I don't like
well,
donuts
to
that
the
much.
average person, maybe if I offered 12 donuts and said you're not going to gain a pound if you eat it, but you feel like crap because afterwards you go through this kind of body shutdown. And when you go through the body shutdown type of thing, a lot of times it creates a little bit of self depression. It creates a little bit of anxiety. I see it in the gym when someone goes on, like after a night of drinking, they'll be on the treadmill running it all off and going crazy because they feel like they overindulge and now they have to remake or overmake all these things up for it to kind of deal with it. But a lot of that happens, people overeat or something, and then they go to sleep and they wake up the next day and they tend to be a little bit more aggressive because they're
Mhm.
just dealing with all the pain that they have inside of themselves onto other people. There's a scientist, Dr. Mark Gordon. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he was talking about he leads a lot of the depression is in your immune, your inflammatory system. He did it because he
Mhm.
did a study on trying to find ways like people that had like their waist blown off or something in war and they lost a lot of like their male testosterone or the glands to be able to produce that. He was trying to find ways like how do we deal with this depression? A lot of that you're not really healing that well because your body's not ready to heal because your body's in a state of critical damage, not only with the leg stuff, but also you're not mentally well. You're depressed. You're not going to, if you're depressed and stuff, all that stuff, types of stuff, you're kind of feel like you're sicker in a way. So he
Mhm.
goes, when you start to realize that a lot of it is your inflammatory system, if you can try and cut out some of the foods that inflame you and do all these types of things, you start to see that the person becomes happier, starts to feel better. If I offer you a healthy meal rather than the fast food cheap option, you're going to feel better about yourself. You're going to want to go do more things. You're going to have more energy, was the basis of his study.
Mhm. Well, yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. I mean, again, the fast food thing is tricky, right? I mean, it goes back to this issue of the two Americas. And one thing I'm careful about is that sometimes the prescriptions that I see in the sort of food world is very focused on things that affluent people can afford, like, sort of the Gwyneth Paltrow effect. And so I try to be mindful of that. Not everybody has resources or, can afford lots of kale every single day
It's
or
it's
lots of, if I probably would have seafood every day, right?
it's
My
pretty
husband didn't
bad
like
that
that.
society has to make a salad like $7 or the stuff to get a salad so expensive. I mean, a mother of 3 kids can't afford that. She'd rather get fast food. It's an easy and cheaper option, have more time to spend with the kids. Where I'm like, this is a societal issue. We need to
Mhm.
find ways to slowly work the progress around and trying to find a healthier structure for people to be able to enjoy.
Well, and also without shaming people. I mean, so the other thing I thought about is that, when you're like, if someone's working a lot of jobs, they come home late, they have hungry kids, they don't have time to do the slow food thing, right?
Yeah, I can't do a crock pot for sure.
I mean, so, I mean, I've been thinking about this because I work with a fine dining chef, Brian Waddell, who is incredible. And we've been thinking about, like, doing these cooking demonstrations in my class. And then the kids come back and say, well, when I have to work until 7 o'clock and I come home, I don't have 3 hours, right? So how do we make this work and on a realistic budget, when you can't drive around to get all the ingredients? And yeah, I've been thinking a little bit more about that. Obviously with the pandemic, many of us have been working from home and our cooking has become very different. Whereas, like, before the pandemic, there was a lot of leftovers in my life, and because I had to work outside the house and come back late, right? So I do think we have to think about this from a pragmatic perspective, and also in a way that doesn't make people feel bad about not having money to spend, or penalize them for their food choices. There's been some criticisms, for example, of Michael Pollan, that his sort of approach to food is very classist. We have to be careful about how we talk about people's foodways, and make sure that they're not disrespectful. There's been a lot of discomfort around when people discuss like cheap ethnic food, right? There's this association between sort of new immigrants, cheap cuisine that is tasty but fattening and unhealthy. And, we have to be careful of the stigmas that are associated with certain culinary traditions and peoples. And so it does get complicated. And so I've been thinking about how do we kind of like thread that needle? Because clearly Americans want to eat better and healthier, but we also have horrible class disparities. And that's something I think we cannot ignore anymore. And this is just it's become a problem, and it's we're the richest country in the world, and yet how many children were going hungry or were food insecure during this pandemic? And as a parent, it's actually quite upsetting to think about this happening in the United States.
That was actually perspective I didn't really understand until a teacher brought it up to me when he talked about a lot of kids wanting to go back to school. Cause I'm like, who would want to go back to school? And he said, like, all the kids that were looking for that free lunch that they would get or that
Yeah.
food that they would get that they don't get at home. This is the issue, is like, it's not shaming to talk about someone. I think everyone understands the aspect of, I don't think a mother of 3 is going to choose the expensive option and try and cook up a meal in the amount of time she has. I'd rather have her spend more time with her kids if it takes
Mhm.
an easy option for food. But the issue is, why is the easy option for food a fast food burger? That shouldn't be like that. That should be, it
Mhm.
should, hell, at the grocery store, if you go there, the vegetable aisle, they're fucking tossing it at you. Like, take it, take the vegetables. It's going to go bad. Here's 79 or 79 cents, all stuff. I noticed when the iceberg lettuce went up $1. I was like, hey, wait a minute. Like, that went up $1. It used to be just like 99 cents. Now it's $1.79. They're like, yeah. And I was like, what is that about? Nobody had an answer for me. I get it. They're Walmart employees. They're not going to know. But I look at that like, what, you got to keep it cheap too, because the cheaper it is at a grocery store. But a lot of people don't have the time to go to a grocery store to be able to
Right.
see that. A lot of the times it's whatever's on the side of the road that's not going to get you out of your car. You can pull into a drive through. And sadly, what happens when you go into a drive through and you look at the menu? What's a
Mhm.
dollar is a burger? What's the expensive stuff? A salad. What's all the expensive stuff? My nephew eating apple dippers. I'm looking at it like that's just tiny watermelon slice shaped items. That's all it is. It's little
Mhm.
tiny things. It's so crazy to me. But I look at that like, I like to bite a crunch of a nice apple. But those apple slices for that bag, it seems like it's half an apple, not even a full one. is like
Mhm.
$3 or something like that as an add-on, or if you don't get the meal. And I'm like, man, like an apple at a store is like $1 something a pound, I'm pretty sure. Like it's not super expensive. I used to eat them like these giant apples at Harris Teeter that are definitely GMOs. They were 5 pound apples. I'm not lying to you. They were huge. But I
Our
would,
apples are huge. They're
yeah,
if you're an archaeologist,
they
when you
were
see or you look at historical art, I can tell you things have gotten a lot bigger. I mean,
I,
as a person trying to grow a garden, I could, you know,
I,
you just have to, we just have to get used to the idea that things are bigger now.
but I look at that and I'm like, it's not, this is not something that someone's going to be able to see when they're working 3 jobs, just trying to make sure they can
Yeah.
afford the home that they live in. And that's where we start to focus on the true issue. It's not about shaming because of what you have. It's about trying to educate on healthier options to take. We say America wants to eat healthy. The world, I don't even consider just America. It's plenty of other countries that are eating like trash, but it's an aspect of also America's doing it a little bit worse. America has all this influence on all these new things. Everything that's created, soda companies are branded here. Soda companies are factored here. They might outsource somewhere else, but it's all here. So everything new, all the unhealthy stuff is right at our doorstep. It doesn't just get sent overseas and everything like that. I have worked at a hotel for plenty of years where I had Russian, Romanian, Bulgarian students come over and they go, oh my God, they gain like 15 pounds over a
Yeah.
summer because all they're used to eating is potatoes and stuff of that sort. They'll call our food shit, but they'll eat 40 slices of pizza without blinking an eye. It's because they don't have that over there. We have the option of having that here, which means that we need to make it either a little bit more expensive, put a tax on it maybe, but make the healthy stuff a little bit cheaper. So people are going to worry about the cost saving rather than the time saving.
Well, yeah, I think cost and time, and maybe also getting. I mean, I think that we need to move in the direction of finding practical meals for people, for real people.
That's true.
Because I want to eat well all the time, but by the time I'm done with everything, sometimes you're like, carbohydrate,
Yeah.
right?
That
Sugar.
I got a container of cereal downstairs where there's some nights I'm just like, that's easier than just cooking up some vegetables or something like that.
Well, yeah. So, and I'd like to work with this chef to do that. It's just, but part of it is like, even in an affluent university like the University of Michigan, we're not at the place right now. I mean, I'm one of the first people to start doing cooking demos as students, right? And we're not set up for that, right? We're not a cooking academy. We're starting to understand the importance of life skills and helping students make a transition and thinking about budgets and so forth. And we actually have like a place where kids can pick up food, for free, no questions asked. But they sort of, it's one thing to get the ingredients, it's another thing to put it together. But we're just starting, and I'm actually hoping that I'll be like, involved in making this a more prominent feature, not just for students, but also doing public outreach. But it will take some effort, and I think some rethinking. Like a lot of recipes online, a lot of these sites, either the food is not very tasty or it's not very practical. We're working parents who are, strung out. I mean, when you have a cranky kid, it
This was the same problem I had with that you just mentioned, like the fact of like life too. It's hard to get a good basic healthy meal down when it's easier to choose the unhealthy option. For instance, my buddy Alex Chirac, he owns a food truck. They made a thing
Mhm.
called the Spurrito. It's a healthy like burrito option that you, and actually during the pandemic he couldn't sell these. He was actually
Right.
also another person out in Wyoming, for instance. She owns a bona fide food truck which brings healthy options, but she brings it to your door. She brings it to you. She wants you to like at ease of convenience. Kind of, it was easier to do during the pandemic when everything was shut down and people were staying inside their homes. But my buddy Alex made a way to be able to make your own Spurrito at home. It was a kit that he would drop
Mhm.
off and you get to make it and also include it for a family thing too, in case you want to sit down with your family and eat. That's 1,000 times easier. There are people out there. I mean, I think the trend has died down a little bit of eating healthy. Back in like before the pandemic was this whole entire like vegan, like this, there's a movement going on where I was talking to so many people. You don't know how many vegans I had on here that were like just talking about like everything's becoming super healthy, but it's still there. People want to eat healthy. I don't think anybody really wants to feel like shit. I know my buddy has been on a weight loss journey, losing up to 50 pounds just by change. He's Italian, so all he ate was pasta. So I was like, just cut out the pasta. You'll get some good stuff in you. And then like he started eating vegetables, started growing his own vegetables, also eating a little bit of meat too, but also lowering his portion size down. You have to be in a calorie deficit to lose weight, but it's just very, very strange because it's not super hard to do these types of things, but society makes it hard. The world has kind of made it a little bit difficult to be able to eat healthy when it comes to the aspect of price, time, all these types of things. When I said I'm not a crock pot person, when I eat, it's a 90-second bag of rice while I'm making tuna, and then I put it in a bowl and then I eat that. I don't, that to me, I'm not a big like sit down and eat type of guy. I'm a big, I want to get it done and move on to my next thing. But
Oh, okay.
with
Yeah.
a crock pot, that's like 12 hours. And I'm like, I don't care if I can leave it in the house or whatever. No, no, no. I want it as soon as I come in the door, I want to make it and make it ready there. I don't want to wait on something like dinner will be at 5. Dinner will be when I'm hungry for it and I want to make it now, that type of thing. But for some people, it's an event. For some people, it's this giant thing. It's time to get down with your family and have these amazing things. I don't think if you told anybody that, hey, what you're putting in your kid is bad for them, they don't want to do that, but they also take it as an attack, like you're criticizing their parenthood.
Mhm.
That's not what it is. It's an aspect. Maybe some people might say that to someone and feel that way. I think that's horrible. But in the grand
There's a lot
aspect,
of judgment in this world around
that
parenting.
that's where I look at, like, we're all trying our best to make sure we're not raising kids that are going to be the worst thing of society, the spawn of whatever, which I don't think is that nobody goes in there thinking that's what they're going to do. If you're a true parent that actually cares about the kid, it's not what's going to happen. But it's an aspect of there's a lot of judgment in this world, whether you're judging on what someone eats, whether you're judging on what someone does, whether you're judging on the looks of something. And somehow during this pandemic, that didn't go away. Somehow we're back to how we were before. The first 2 weeks of this thing, everybody was like, does your grandpa need groceries? Does your grandma need groceries? And now it's like, I want you to wear a mask or I'm going to stab you in the eye with a pencil. And I'm like, guys, what are we doing? Can we go focus on like the real issues? We have factory industrial farming. That's horrible. We could be growing a lot more. Why have we created domes across like giant crop fields to not worry about weather hazards that happen? My Whitney was talking about, she had a giant flooding in her rice farm. It became so much of an issue. It was hard for the workers to get in there to be able to do stuff like that. And I'm like, there we go. What are we doing? Are we not focused on this? What are we focused on? Oh, going to Mars. That's the biggest thing on our mind right now. Not that this world is slowly killing itself.
What I haven't read the news this morning. I'm always afraid Mondays.
What, did you know that we went to Mars?
I thought we had probes there for
Oh my goodness.
really? I did not read the news.
No, you're good. It's okay. Skip on the news. Let's worry about space travel later.
I haven't looked at stuff.
No, I mean, we landed on the moon about a month ago. If you want to say probes, yeah, that's what I meant. Probes.
Okay. Well, I mean, the moon's old, right? We did that before.
Not moon. I meant Mars. I said Mars, didn't I?
Oh, okay.
No,
Yeah.
Bezos is going to the moon. That's what's crazy. The guy from
but
Amazon.
we just sending we didn't send people out there, did we?
No, he's taking a space shuttle. Have you seen his rocket? Everyone's making fun of it on Twitter. It looks like a male nether part.
Oh, yeah. No, I haven't been keeping up with the news.
I try not to, but it just somehow gets into my news feed where I'm like, wow, that rocket, he wants to go up there. They're talking about building hotels on Mars and everything. That's Elon's next plan. And I'm like, guys, come on. Like, this Earth is literally like, I'm not an environmentalist, but I look at it like I honestly enjoy sitting outside and smelling fresh air. When I take a deep breath outside, I smell seawater because I'm right on the ocean. But I'm never going to, like, you look up at the stars at night. There's not that many stars out because of how our atmosphere is so like just pollution and all that air pollution's up there. I would like to be able to try and find ways to help fix a lot of this thing. Not Bill Gates's idea of trying to dim the sun by bursting particles into the air, which is insane. But I digress. Let's go to
Bill Gates is busy now dealing with his divorce and the fallout. So
that's why his wife was like, what are you talking about dimming the sun? He's like, it's a great idea. Look, I think he's got good hopes for people, but the way he says shit, I'm like, you're coming off like a supervillain. Like, what are you doing to me?
I don't know. I mean, I try to keep my Twitter feed free of politics and just focus on fun things because there's a lot of that on the internet.
I try and stick with like, I dip my hands in every single pool where I'm like, all right, I have ex-cult people on. I got to talk to some religious people too. I can't just be one-sided. And then it becomes my algorithm guy's like, I don't know where to take it. Where do we go? Does he want this or does he not?
No, it's funny because you know, academics on Twitter usually meant like in the last 4 years, like, dump on Trump every single day, right? And so the world did not need yet another academic doing that. So I thought, I could lighten it up, focus on food.
Well, that's what I liked. I actually came across you from a past guest, Bryce Evans, who was on here talking about he studies food history as well too, but mostly with airplanes, like how that industry has kind of changed with air
Oh,
travel.
okay. I don't know how. So he directed you to me.
Well, no, he follows you. I just found you through his.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, somebody's got to like lighten things up. That's my view. That it's been kind of intense the last few years, right, in the United States.
Well, it's like
And
one
I think
person
all of us
posts a
could use breaks.
one
And
one person posts a duck picture, and then next thing you know, they're going off about Trump or Biden. I'm like, what just happened? That was a peaceful duck.
well, yes, and I mean, every now and then I get something that's like not like somebody posted bat soup on my wall. That was
That's soup.
classy. Just I get a little of that, or I get some hate mail from vegans. You know,
What?
um, and it's like, can we chill out?
Yeah. It's
Can
so
we chill out?
see, I look at when people start getting super political, I goes like, oh, at least you care about the world. And then it goes down this whole entire huge rabbit hole of just nonstop fighting. I'm like, now you're dismantling what the whole point of all this is. I'm like, you should look at that as a bunch of people caring about a world and how it's kind of running, but nobody's fixing key issues. They just want their guy to be in office. I'm like, I just want to focus on the real shit. Like the fact that there's a lot of problems. Like it's very, very hard to afford a home. We have all these millennials that are living at home. And so they're in their late 30s or mid 30s because it's $2,000 a month to get a place in my area, just a
where
small one
where
bedroom
where is your
spot.
area?
Ocean City, Maryland. It's kind of like a
Okay.
tourist type town, but I get it. And I'm like, I could live somewhere else and it could be $600 a month
Hmm.
living there and something like that. And that's with maybe sometimes utilities, depending on how small I want to go. But down here, that's the least expensive is $2,000. And I'm like, why is this? You start to notice if you're poor is the more they tax you and the richer you are, the easier you got it, not just on the basis of having money, but on the basis of the government doesn't want to fucking deal with you.
Well, yes, there's the sort of question of whether our tax code is, regressive, right? And that is concerning. Like I think Social Security taps off at 117. So if you make 120, you're paying no more in terms of, you know, Social Security tax, which is, a decent chunk of your gross income. And that has always struck me as rather odd, right? We would think that the high earners should pay more,
Yeah.
not the person who's working, at the grocery store.
But then you can't be like, well, if the rich have to pay more taxes, then why are you taxing me for being successful? And I'm like, look, I don't know what the answer is. I just want to focus on are aliens real? Is that cool? Can we
Oh
find
yeah,
that
I know that you know, I I'm not an economist, but I do think, I like to focus on things that are a little bit where we can find some common ground. Food is something that we can find common ground in. This is actually one of the few safe subjects of discussion. Is what's on the plate. I mean, there's some divisive components to it too, but it's not like you can start a conversation about what you're eating. You cannot start a conversation about politics or even sports, right?
What would you say is probably your if I had to offer you a death row meal? I'm not saying you're gonna die, but like a last meal, what would it be?
Oh, that's a good question. Probably a pastry.
What kind of pastry?
French pastry, like the millefeuille or the Napoleons with the glaze,
Oh yeah, I know what those are.
the custard.
Mine's a
Um,
Ben and Jerry's ice cream. I've had it since I was a kid. I haven't had it in ages, but a Ben and Jerry's fish food or what is it, half baked, the chocolate chip cookie. I don't care if it's trash for my body. That's a delicacy. That was a staple when I was a kid.
yeah, I'm not an ice cream person. But I mean, look, it's just you have to. There's a lot of good food in the world, right? So I very much enjoy looking and thinking and trying food. And also, it's a more, I would say, efficient way to teach history or world history because one plate can be connected to so many different historical movements and peoples. You don't have to go to a museum. You don't have to inhale dusty book pages. Often the artifact is on your plate and in your mouth, and I find that is a way of making sort of the deep past much more sort of relatable to Americans who are considerably younger than me. I have
So it's that's how I found out about cornflakes. I was eating a bowl of cornflakes. I was like, where did this come from? Who decided to
right.
make cornflakes? And I found that. And then I was like, oh my God, is all food interesting? And then I searched up like, where did celery come from? Not as interesting. Not at all as
But
interesting.
celery used to be expensive,
Yeah.
right?
Until they figure out it's mostly made of water. And they're like, we're charging a lot for this.
Well, I think there are different celery types. The Chinese have a version of the celery that isn't as fibery,
I
so it
don't know
doesn't get
about
stuck in
that.
your teeth. It's
I,
really good, actually.
hey, that's the only vegetable I technically really eat every single meal that I have is I have a stick of celery.
Oh no, but it's not. It's you get the crunch without the fibers in your teeth, and then they slice it up and they stir fry it.
That's too fancy.
Angelica leaves. It's really good. I mean, so even celery could be interesting.
I mean, yeah, if you put peanut butter and put salt and pepper, I'm kidding.
No,
I'm
it's a
kidding.
historical artifact. I'm thinking about societies where milk is very rare and it's a special gift. I mean, whereas we dump our milk, right?
What about bread? Bread used to be grinded down by sandstone, or not
Yeah.
grindstones, but they used to grind it down, and it actually used to grind down your teeth as well too. Like when you get sand in your sandwich, and you're like, I
Mhm.
live at the beach, so this is an actual common problem. If you get sand in a PB&J, it's like whenever I bite a PB&J and it doesn't have sand in it, I'm like, where's the sand? Like I'm used to having the sand in there, but
Oh, okay.
it grinds your teeth down a lot. Like back in the day when they didn't have the process made right. That's a great stride and innovation of society that it doesn't do that today.
Well, the rotary mill, yeah. I mean, bread is one of the oldest foods out there, right? Bread and beer.
Do you know where cheese balls came from?
No, what are those?
The little like aren't like they're like Cheetos, but they're like circular little balls. They're cheese.
I've never seen them.
It's like a circular Cheeto. You know what a Cheeto is, right?
Yeah, I know what Cheeto is.
Okay, they come in like a giant tub, like the tub of pretzels that you'll get. They come in one of those
Right.
giant tubs that people use as piggy banks. But it's with there was a machine that was grinding up maize, like corn, was grinding it up,
Mhm.
and a bunch of that corn, a lot of the stuff got gunked up into the gears, and a guy cleaned it out and decided that it was like in a ball form. He ate it. And he was like, oh my God, this would be great if you put it into a snack. And then they ended up evolving it into cheese balls. But that was the origin of that. And I was like, that's fascinating. What else can I
That's
eat
kind of
off the
cool. Yeah, no.
ground?
Wow. I mean, yeah, no, these things happen. I mean, accidents are useful in the kitchen. I mean, not all of them are delicious, but some of them are.
Until I sliced my finger trying to open up a bag of
Ooh,
rice.
yeah. I mean, so food history is fun. There's a lot of crazy stuff out there. It's full of surprises.
You're kind of, you seem like you're keeping guarded from me. What, come on. What is it? Come on.
How guarded? I mean, I don't know. It's just probably just a habit of thinking through what you say.
You say, I say a lot of stuff. That's why I say like, it's not an interview. It's just conversation. I'm just,
No, I know. It's just that,
thoughts.
I live in a time where people weigh their words, right? And they don't want to give offense. And, it's just part of the process.
I've done too many episodes. I don't have
You've done too
time.
many episodes. How many academics have you had to interview who are,
Probably about 470 something, from
okay,
astrophysicist to chemist to, I mean, every single thing. I think
and so you get them to drop the F-bombs?
some of them technically do. Yeah. Because a lot of it comes to this point where with Twitter, like I'm not saying you have to drop an F-bomb or anything, but it's also not like everyone's just looking to find a similarity. A PhD, academic, whatever you want to call it, doesn't disparage you from being a human being of the capability of having a
Sometimes
conversation.
you'd be surprised.
I don't know.
No, I mean, I'm very careful. I mean, part of it is pedagogical, right? Like I don't mouth off, for example, on China on Twitter, because I want to make sure that the students feel they have a space to have open discussions and not worry about disagreeing with me. So some of that is deliberate. Some of it is also, I don't know.
That's why I have not brought up the CCP in this conversation, because
The
that's the one that gets me
CCP,
upset.
it's a huge organization.
I'm not, I already put it out there. If somebody sees me get shot in the head, it was the CCP. I've talked too much trash on the CCP. I have problems with every government. It's not just one, it's all of it.
Well, I mean, and so there's that. I mean, so I try to think about what I tweet, and I think about what I write.
That's not, I mean, that's important to do, especially if you don't want to lose like your academic career, if you don't want to do anything that would disparage what you have or what you've built. I mean, that's the importance of the thing. That's not what I'm about. I'm just about trying to understand why you love this topic so much, trying to understand.
Why do I love the topic? I like food. I mean, this is like, it's because I spend my entire life thinking about what I'm going to eat next. And
that's
it's
not
also,
good.
it's easier to relate to people on food than it is on like very sort of abstract concepts, right?
Except
Of
when you
like,
said you didn't like ice cream, I'm like, where do you live? Ben and Jerry's is awesome.
I'm not an ice cream person. Like if I were to think about ways of killing myself, by
What?
eating, like ice cream is not going to be my undoing. Okay.
Oh no, not ice cream. I was just
Not,
thinking.
I'm just, yeah. I mean, it's okay, but it's really not. It's I mean, I'll give you something that you'll probably find strange. So, about 4 years ago, I was off in China in the Southwest observing sort of their cheese making practices, because there's an indigenous cheese making tradition that's similar to Panir in Southwest China, and I got really hooked on this local specialty, which is this flaky pastry that is filled with like roses, sweetened roses. Oh, I love, and it's egg free, which is good because my daughter can't eat eggs. So of course I ate it. I fell in love. It's flaky. It gets all over the place. It's crumbly. It's like it's kind of got the. It's a little bit like a croissant in some ways, but it's a cookie. And so I bought a whole bunch for my daughter. But like I finding things like that, which you don't expect to find, it's just so exciting.
It's
So
definitely.
yes, people say I'm boring because all I want to do is talk about food.
I think you're probably an awesome person. I mean, from what I've experienced in this podcast, I don't know you personally, but it seems like you could probably get into some weird topics for sure. But food's a good one to start off on. I mean, I would like to have you back on if you'd like to come back on and talk about something else or
You
something.
should get my chef Ryan out, like my collaborator. I mean,
Set me
we're
up.
I will, but he's like he and I were talking. Like, so I said to him, my students and I were debating whether there would be a world where they could have they would be willing to pay $50 for a bowl, for a plate of orange chicken. Which is like the number
Yes.
one item at Panda Express, right? And we were all laughing about this, right? Because Asian Americans have a very sort of dim view of orange chicken, and I was one of them, right? But as I think about food history more critically, I realized that food changes as it moves between places, right? Like I'll give you like a factoid. So pad thai originally was a Chinese dish,
Yeah.
right? So orange chicken is in some ways similar to pad thai and ramen. It's a Chinese dish that's been heavily modified by its new environment. But is there a day, today you can go to some place in the East Coast, right? Hell's Kitchen, and pay a lot of money for a gourmet bowl of ramen, right? It's a thing. It's a fancy food. You also, yeah. So I asked them, I said, would you pay $50 for a bowl of like, orange chicken? And they said, when you can buy it for $1.99 at Panda Express, no way.
Yeah, that's
So,
that's the that's the cost matter. My buddy's a sushi chef. Josh Schnar, shout out to him. He was on here a long time ago. We were talking about like how to tell the real authentic restaurants versus the non-authentic ones. Like if they have takeout menus on the side, it's not an authentic one. But my question is, why do they paint the pork pink?
well, I mean, that's they don't paint the pork pig. I mean, there's this like way of processing when you roast the pork, you're putting it into a marinade, and that's where the color comes from. It's actually good. Like, have you had
I'm not saying
chasio?
it's bad. I'm just saying
But
I
it's like it's like a roast pork, like the Cantonese. I mean, I grew up near one like a butcher, and they would have these like pinkish, like roasted pork, in the window. And I'm not a meat eater, but I love that. And they put it in the buns, it's chassis ball,
yeah.
and so yeah, no, it's really good. And again, there's a few things that I like that much, but yeah, it's the processing. They marinate it and then they roast it, and it's flaky on the outside and sweet and savory at the same time. And yeah, no,
My
no, no,
buddy,
no.
he used to work, a personal friend of mine. He was on too, but I wouldn't call him a sushi chef, but he washed dishes at one of these places. And he goes, I hate the sweet and sour. Don't ever mention sweet and sour chicken to me. I'm like, why? He goes, it gets stuck to the pan like candy. And I'm like, oh, I don't even realize like how much work goes into this until like I hear about it.
Oh, well, sweet and sour is fine. I mean, it's I guess I don't believe that there's such a thing as authentic food. I think that there's food that tastes like the home country and that doesn't, right? But obviously a marketing concept in the United States
Yeah.
in a very, very big way. But back to orange chicken. So I talked to this chef and I said, okay, Chef Ryan, you're a fine dining chef. How would you make orange chicken satisfy the food snobs? Like, because the French Laundry, which is the restaurant that got Governor Gavin Newsom into some trouble when he put everybody else in lockdown and decided to splurge on a special meal without
I
his
remember
mask like
that.
a jackass, right?
Hypocrites.
Well, my
Orange
my
chicken.
dad told me to go easy on him, but I was like, that sucks, okay? Because I think about all those families that are like
Yeah.
facing eviction, and it's upsetting.
My boy Ted Cruz taking a flight. All right, let's go. Orange chicken.
Well, we've had many examples of this kind of thing over the course of the pandemic, right? You just pick a state, but I mean, we could have like like an advent calendar version or something, or anyway. So the French Laundry is like this really gourmet place. The prefix menu, I forget how much it is. Is it 400 or 600, whatever it is? But they serve fried chicken there. And my question is, Tom Kelleher, chef, why don't you serve orange chicken? Like, show me that you can do something like, that's really cutting edge or against the grain. And so I sat down with this fine dining chef and I said, so how would we do it? He's like, orange marmalade. And I'm like, kudzu juice, and I really like this concept of a gourmet orange chicken that people would spend $50 to eat. I think that would be the orange, I would call it the orange chicken challenge,
That's a good one.
like taking these sort of like classic Chinese American dining restaurant menu items that the snobs have like banished from the menus 50 years ago, who they've basically lambasted for being heavily modified Chinese restaurants, items or things that are invented in the United States, jokes, hoaxes, insults, whatever, right? And if we could get somebody who really knows how to cook and use good ingredients, then we could have a challenge, which is like, okay, is this inherently any worse than anything else? Like, I bet orange chicken could be amazing. I haven't successfully made it. I mean, I tried making a version once with my daughter when she was like a year and a half old. And I remember she took one bite of my orange chicken, she put her binky back in her mouth,
I don't have the capability or amount of patience to be able to make an actual meal. That's why I do the cans of tuna. But something interesting with the orange chicken thing, for instance, my buddy owns a food truck. His name's Vinny Silva. He owns like a best Philly cheesesteak in like
Mhm.
New Jersey. That's what his whole thing is, making a Philly cheesesteak. And he came to me in an episode. We actually, and you can check it. It's probably like 300 something of mine. But through the episode, we discovered like a vegan way of making a cheesesteak, not just like
Oh,
cheese on bread. But I told him, why don't you use pasta? He's like, pasta. I'm like, it's very, very weird. But like for me, I used to eat like a cabbage leaf to get the crunch. So I would stop eating breads and things of that sort, like garlic bread, like these crunch factors that your mind like kind of subliminally needs in a way, especially if you're dieting or fasting. It's just tricks that I learned through like the fitness industry. And
yeah.
I told him, why don't you use pasta instead of meat? And he goes, why pasta? I was like, if you get the long, like the whistle blow noodles, the ones you can kind of blow through like a whistle, those long ones, when you bite into it on a cheesesteak, just that like Alfredo sauce or something, and then put it on bread, when you bite into it, it's the flakiness feels like you're biting into meat, where you get that bite that you have in a cheesesteak where the meat drips off and hits the plate. And he did it, and it was a good seller. It was that aspect of like finding a way. And that was an interesting thing that I brought in to perspective or something, where he's ended up selling it on his food truck. Now it is a carbo load. You are eating bread on basically with pasta in it, but it is an aspect of it was a different meal that people actually saw and actually really kind of enjoyed in a way too, because a lot of people wanted those healthier options and he wasn't getting that traffic because people wanted these vegans. They wanted gyros, and he's a cheesesteak place besides having like a side
Why not
salad.
use gluten though? Like this way, and then it's just the wheat protein that mimics the texture of meat.
Yes.
It's very cheap. You can buy gluten from Amazon in huge bags, and
this was a year and a half ago.
I know, he should try it. It's like the Chinese have been using gluten as a meat substitute for 1,000 years. It's tried and true.
Don't knock my idea.
Well, I mean, I don't eat enough meat to worry about meat substitutes.
I don't either. That's why I was like, I'm a fish guy.
I also don't avoid bread, right?
I do.
I know you're trying to look a certain way, right? I mean,
I have a 6-pack and I'm keeping my 6-pack.
Okay, well, I mean,
that's a big thing.
I don't go to the gym.
When I smell a Domino's pizza, I lose my shit because that smell of oregano on the crust, I'm like, God, this is where like someone just eats a whole entire plate of it. I can't do it.
Well, I mean, you're working out, so I don't really like Italian pasta that much. It's too hard for me. Like, I'm used to Chinese pasta, which is softer.
I'm not trying to change you. I'm just
But
speaking the
no,
way
I
I
don't
am.
eat, but I don't eat much of it, right? Because I think also the other thing is in my house, if we make our own noodles and
What?
yeah, we do the pulled noodles,
Oh, that's so
we
awesome.
do the we hand cut and of course I always think about like, okay, how much time is it going to take? How much cleanup? And so you don't end up doing it every day, right?
My buddy makes he's like pure Italian, like his family is from Italy, and they make sourdough bread and pizzas
Hmm.
and that thing. That compared to a regular store bought pizza, you're like, what if I what you don't want to go back? You're like, everything's kind of ruined to me unless you throw oregano on it, and then I'm like, I'm 100% in. I don't care.
Yeah, we make our own pizza dough. I mean, s- part of it is also because I've been doing things from scratch for a while that it's kind of
It
a
feels better once you eat it when you make it from scratch.
or you're just tired and you don't eat too much of it at the end of the process.
When I make anything that's not a can of tuna, I feel
Yeah.
successful. It's like making my bed in the morning. I feel like I can take on the rest of the day.
Well, also you're probably less likely to eat certain things. Like I don't eat chocolate chip cookies because I've been making them. When
What?
you find out how much butter is in those things.
Oh yeah, that's true. I
I
don't
mean,
care.
there's just I used to make my own macaron. So I think part of it is just like that. I've noticed that the tendency to overdo something is much less when you do everything from scratch. Like I don't have a struggle with pasta because I make it. And
Can
then
I ask you a specific food memory? I'm gonna give you one of mine that means the most to me, and a lot of people are gonna you probably might laugh at it. It is a little bit kind of ridiculous, but it's a good one in my opinion. Not just Ben and Jerry's, but whenever it's a Thanksgiving and we have Hawaiian rolls, like the little rolls that
mhm.
you get, the small square ones, I always ask whoever's making them to leave them in the oven because that's always been the tradition every Thanksgiving we've ever had. Like my grandma would sit with us when we had these family Thanksgivings, and we'd be eating because my mom would be rushing to cook everything and get everybody their plates and have everybody sitting down. And she'd go and sit and eat. Then after the meal, we'd be like, "Where's the bread rolls?" And then they would be in the oven burned. And I love that smell of the burned bread. And a couple Thanksgivings I had to work, I couldn't be here for it. So I asked when I come home, I just want to walk in the door and smell burnt bread rolls because it's a nostalgia thing for me. It's this giant capture of like that's a great moment for me. And she was like, "Don't insult me." I'm like, "I'm not. That's literally what I want. I'm not necessarily going to break a tooth on it, but I also would want to, I want to smell that smell." And then this past Thanksgiving, my grandma was too sick to leave the house. So we actually took her food. She's no longer with us. So this Thanksgiving is going to be a little bit different. But the smell of those burnt bread rolls, even though when I came home, because my mom was taking care of my grandma, she had some burnt bread rolls on the counter, and that's what like it means a lot to me. I don't know if you have a certain food like that that means something special to you like that. Like I said, people are going to laugh, it's burnt bread, but to me it's a home factor.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of stuff on food memory. Do I have anything specific? No, not really. I mean, oddly
What?
enough. I mean, in the sense that every morning I wake up to the smell of the coffee I've made, and that
That's not the same. You
I
got
don't know. I
you
mean,
don't have one food that a family member or something, a traditional food that was made to you when you were a little kid. You're like, everything that's ever happened in my life has gone away. All the pain is gone. And I'm here enjoying this moment.
no, no.
Wow.
I don't know why. I mean, it's just
It's going to be this big movie ending to this episode. And you're just like,
no.
nope.
I know.
I'm kidding.
No, no. I think with someone like me, because there's so much food that it's probably not that one thing, you know, like stands out. Um, I don't know why. I just know that when I go back to San Francisco, which is where I'm from, uh-huh, I usually do a pastry run so I can bring it back for my family.
It's
But
awesome.
I just don't, it's
Well, that's a good thing. A pastry doesn't have to be a specific pastry, but it's a type of food that when you come
I don't know, I
home,
go to
you want to
three
share with your
pastry places.
three.
And then I'm like carrying it all back. And I mean, you know,
What did they not have
distributing
at the first
pastries,
one or the second one?
like
You had to go to the third
my
one.
husband says that every time I go anywhere, he says I've mapped out the city, in terms of all the French pastry shops, and that all roads lead to pastry shops, and it's like that there's always you think you're going to the museum, but the end of the road it's a pastry shop, and you know so I guess for a food obsessed person, which I've understood that like when years and years ago on a trip to China, and my friend was like an American, like both parents are American in her case, me not so much, but we're there, and she says to me, God, all I ever talk about here is food and money. And what's wrong with this place? And I realized at one point that maybe what we had is the wrong questions for our subjects, right? And so now all I do is talk about food in China. All I do is talk about food and life, and so I was like putting my daughter to bed the other night, and I was talking to her about the origins of pastoralism, and my daughter was, pushing me on, why don't the Mongols have sheep? Why did they start with sheep, not cows? And what do you pull to get the milk? So I think it's a little bit like that, where there's so much food in my head that nothing particularly stands out. I know it's really weird.
My mascot was a food source at one point.
Oh yeah.
My dodo bird mascot. He was hunted to the end of extinction, all for food.
Wow. I mean, we eat, right? I mean, like, not everybody
just one. Just leave one. Nobody left one or two to breed.
Oh, are you sure there's no sperm bank somewhere? Or
dodo birds have been extinct since 18 something. Like, they've gone.
Well, yeah, it's too bad. You might find them somewhere. I mean, that's the other thing, is we find previously believed, thought extinct species sometimes in Tasmania or something like this. That there are these spots where they reappear.
I'm hopeful, but it's also like, you ever see Ice Age?
No.
You've never seen Ice Age, the kids cartoon?
I don't watch any television.
Saying it's possible a dodo exists is like saying it's possible a mammoth's still alive.
Oh, don't we have all those like mammoth? We probably have mammoth DNA.
We do, but we don't have dodo ones, sadly, because everyone ate it.
Well,
we found mammoth.
Get a different mascot.
No,
I mean, pandas are good.
Well, the main meaning behind that, why I picked them, is because everyone, like, when you call someone an idiot, you call someone a dodo. Like, you're a dodo. That's the whole thing. Because the dodo bird has been known, it went extinct because it was an idiot, was the thing. And then they figure out that the dodo was actually naive because it was only dodo only lived on one small island. I think it was like Montserrat or something like that, a very, very small little island. And these settlers came over and they had never known any dangers. Their food source was fruit or like vegetables or like grass and stuff of that sort. So they came up to these settlers, which eventually, after a while, these guys started getting hungry, killing one or two, and they ended up killing them all off. So it's not that it was necessarily stupid. It was just it was naive. It didn't understand what a real danger was, because the only other animals were the other ones. So I'm like, let's bring the dodo back. Underdog. That's what I'm talking about.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, but Americans ate all the turtles too. There's a species of turtles that we ate into extinction.
It's like shark fin soup.
Well, shark fin soup is still around, right? But it's now not considered the most kosher food. But this is an American food, and you find it on turn of the century menus.
Nobody knows the exact what's in a hot dog. Pig intestines, pig butt. I don't know. It's like, do you actually know what it comes from? Because it's pretty disgusting.
I don't eat processed meat.
Neither do I. I know where it comes from, though. That's why I probably don't eat it.
Well, I mean,
wait, is tuna processed?
Well, are you concerned about the mercury levels?
Oh, I have mercury poisoning, but I don't care. I'm all in.
Okay. See, as a person who once gestated a baby, they have like guidelines on tuna consumption.
I'm only making it to 26, and then that's it. I don't care what happens after that. Things just start falling apart. That's fine. I went to my doctor. He's like, you have mercury poisoning. I'm like, yeah, but tuna's $1. He goes, you know what mercury poisoning causes, right? I have to read you the list. And I'm like, sure, go ahead. He goes, depression. I'm like, got that. He's like, hair loss. Got that. Actually, no, my hair is going gray, though. I'm kind of scared that I'm going to look old when I'm in my 20s, but I don't care.
Well, you can dye your hair.
I'm not a rock star.
You know that there's like, yeah, well, I mean, it's going to happen to the best of us. I'm starting to get some gray, but
I'm turning into a wizard. You like that? My buddy was like, you're just turning into a wizard. You're soaking up all these conversations you've had.
Okay, so how did you get this idea of this? This is an experimental podcast. So just tell me, where did the idea come from? Experimental?
It's been going on for 2.5 years.
I know, but this is like a different format. I mean, it sounds like you find people, you talk to them, and then
I invite people with PhDs. I invite people that make whatever you want. It's just conversation is what I try and tell people. Actually,
we should talk to Ryan Waddell.
Get him on the show.
You should get him on the show because
message me
he was a fine dining chef who lived in Thailand for 10 years and comes back to the United States. And it's like
I don't know his handle. What's his handle?
He's not on Twitter.
But you got to message him and tell him I'm interested.
I will. And unlike me, he's not self-censoring.
I think you're pretty cool. I think I warmed you up a little bit towards the ending.
Well, no, it's just that,
I'm not a bad guy. I'm a good guy.
Have you seen all the stories about people tweeting things and getting in trouble, people putting things on social media,
people tweeted that Helen Keller was not real. I don't know what you want to expect out of society.
But I live in the world where you have to watch your words, right? Words
I do too.
Are weapons. That's what I've been told.
I got called a racist by somebody because he was like, all you have is old white men. And I looked through my episodes. I was like, the past 7 were white men. Then there was someone that was Asian on my show. And I'm like, you could be anybody. It doesn't matter. I'm just talking to people. What do you want from me? Oh, God, here's where the stress comes in. I can
set you up with some people.
I just want to talk to people because I'm genuinely interested. One of my close friends, she lives in Beirut. She's known as the female Neil deGrasse Tyson. She's an astrophysicist. She's on TV down there all the time. She's been on 4 or 5 times, but her 4th time, she was like, this is me talking as a person, not a scientist. And she talked all about depression, all the mental health stuff. We all are people. We all generally think the same on some things. We know a little bit of information, but information is meant to be shared, not meant to be held. You want to be better our society together. And that starts with community and conversation.
Yeah, I think so. And, and
I'm also 23 and I think I got the world figured out. No, I'm kidding.
Well, yeah. So when it was, what's your job? Like your other job?
I work at a gym.
Okay.
This is just a passion project. I don't want to.
No, I know you have a child?
No, that was my nephew.
Oh, it's your nephew.
I call him my little one because I'm trying to make him as much as me as possible. His mom, he goes home to his mom. I watched Jaws, and that was like, oh crap. That's when I got in trouble with my brother.
How old is he?
He's 3.
Oh,
Jaws is a good flick. You get to see all like the crazy animatronics and the song. The song means so much, but they're like, it's blood and murder. I'm like, I'll skip those parts. Don't hide the kid. It's real.
Like, see, my 5-year-old goes, that's a meanie show.
That's
like, turn that down. Yeah, no, my child is very assertive.
I'm not watching Baby Shark. I want to show him the real shark, the one that eats people.
No. My daughter is like, she has lots to say. You could bring her on the show, and for an hour, she would do all the talking.
I would love to hear
about fairies, wizards, and whatever the heck.
Yes.
I mean,
thank you.
She has an opinion about everything.
Do you know who Tom Holland is?
No.
Good. I'm about to say, because that's who people. Spider-Man, the new Spider-Man.
Yeah, I'm trying to work too much over this break, but this pandemic has contributed to my house being a mess and everything just being kind of crazy. So
hang on. So Tom Holland is the new Spider-Man. And usually throughout these episodes, somebody will screenshot my face and they'll match my face up next to Tom Holland, mostly because people say I look like him. And I will show you a picture as soon as I find one. But I look like I'm going to have to scroll for a while on here. So I'm going to keep talking until I find it. Okay. Wow, I got to go really far back. Holy crap. Did I delete it?
Tom Holland? Not aware of such a person.
Google search. You're on your computer. I can hear the mouse clicks.
I'm looking for it. Let's see. Tom Holland. English actor?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, no, not really.
Ouch.
Kind of, yeah.
If I find this photo, you'll be like, oh, okay, I see it now. It's because my hair is getting longer. I had a hat on earlier. Don't judge me. Oh my goodness. How far back do I have to go through my messages? I thought this was, I did not know I have to clear out some of these photos. These are some old ones. Wow. We're not ending this until I find it. So good luck. Do you know any good show?
No, I'm gonna help you with your guest list. I mean, Chef Ryan is very interesting. I mean, I don't know any American who's lived in Thailand for 10 years and had a restaurant.
Hey, one of my past guests, a good friend of mine, Jason Latona, he lived in Thailand for, I think, 9 years, actually. He's an ex-Power Ranger. He's an arm wrestler
Okay.
now, but I was like,
They
wait a
probably
minute.
know each other. They probably know each other.
Ask him about Jason Latona.
Okay. Jason Latona. I mean,
Shout out to Jason if Jason listens to this. I don't edit these, so this is going to be all included. But
no,
I'm going to find this picture. Oh my God. I'll go to my Instagram. I don't care. If people see my personal Instagram, that's my fault. Hold on. I'm in the city, but my internet still sucks. Hang on. Do you got any knock knock jokes while I'm looking for this?
No, I don't know any knock knock jokes. My daughter does them all. Oh, I see. Okay. A little bit.
There's a guy at my work, because it was a joke through my podcast, but a guy at my work was like, do you know who Tom Holland is? So every time I see him, I just go like this with the Spider-Man thing.
Oh.
I like to
I
make
haven't
people
watched
stay better.
I didn't even know there was a new Spider-Man.
He's in all the Avengers. Where have you been all your life?
Well,
I'm kidding.
I mean, you know what it's like to try and watch a movie with a 5-year-old around?
It's probably impossible. Trying to get my little nephew to sit and watch Jaws is a task and a half.
She'll probably come in and like take over the interview.
But look, Miranda, I've wasted enough of your time. You've given me plenty of time. I really appreciate you talking to me on my podcast. I'd love to have you back on whenever you get a chance. But is there anything you want to promote? Any social media links? Any links to anything that you want to promote?
No, I mean, they can check out ChineseFoodHistory.org if they want to, see sort of 7-minute reads on sort of various aspects of Asian food history. I don't sell anything.
Yeah, well, I mean, just anything, like if you write a blog or something people want to read too.
That's my blog. It can also find me on Twitter, which is, I guess, apparently it's easier to find me on Twitter and my blog than to find my university page, which is just as well because the university page is dull.
I'm 23. I don't use my email.
You don't use email? Oh.
My email is, I was going to say it, but I'm not going to because I'll get a bunch of messages and I don't want that. I just prefer social media to me is just easier because it's got everybody in one little thing. And then I want to branch communities.
That's great. Well, no, this sounds like fun. And thanks for inviting me. And I will set you up with some folks who I think are probably less guarded.
You're going to be my excellent matchmaker. We're going to have you back on. I feel like I warmed you up towards the end.
Okay. Sounds good. All right.
All right. Well, thank you, Miranda, for being on this episode Out of the Blank. Stay tuned for our next episode.